Today's topic, how alcohol affects your business and how quitting can skyrocket your career. We're talking business, we're talking booze, and how dropping the bottle might just be the best career move you've ever made. I know for a fact it was for me, and I'm going to share a little bit about that here in just a minute. There was a point where I was showing up to work, usually late, but I was trying to put a smile on. And on the inside, I was exhausted. I was burnt out. I was negative. I was not up to my 100% self. I was hungover. And I was wondering how long I could keep faking it. And quitting drinking, man, I got to say, it didn't just save my health. It didn't just save my family. It didn't just save my job. It saved my sanity. And I found purpose in life after that. And so, man, I can't stress it enough. If you're out there listening to this and you're thinking, you've already had the thought that, man, this isn't serving me right and something's off, you're on the right track. And don't second guess that thought, because I'll say it again, as I've said it before, and you're probably getting tired of hearing me say it. I've still never heard anybody say my habitual drinking habits have really improved my life. Haven't heard it. So let's talk about it. Let me elaborate a little further on that and share a little bit. Okay. So let's kind of talk about how alcohol can affect not just our personal life, but our work life, our business, our mindset, our spirit, that entrepreneurship spirit. If you're a business owner or you have dreams of starting a business like I did, so many times, I can remember so many times, I'd be in my garage late at night drinking and, just, imagining stuff and having these grandiose, ideas of what life would be like and how I was going to do this. And I wanted to do that, but I never did any of it. I never took action on any of it because it was just a dream. And I wasn't able to be in a good enough state, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in order to take action into that. And the alcohol was the biggest roadblock between it all. And that's what it's designed to do. So let's talk a little bit about, I want to take you back here. And I've shared this before on the podcast, in the past, but it's such an important part of my story. I want to share it again. And, I came from a background in my 20s. I was in the union. I was a union drywall finisher. I had some great buddies of mine who were still friends till today, kind of get me on their crew. And I was an apprentice at first, and I ended up journeying out as a drywall finisher. Didn't really necessarily love the work. It was very hard work. It paid pretty well, but there was a lot of travel involved. I saw some of the dudes who were older, than me at the time, and they were beat up. They were angry. They didn't like their jobs. They didn't like their wives, a lot of them. And it just, the more that I thought about, I didn't like having to work all the time. And just like, I didn't feel it. Just, man, I can remember sanding days on end out in San Francisco in these units, these condo units. And it would be literally like 8 hours of sanding all day, ceilings, just the whole thing. And I remember just going, God, like there's got to be more to this. And when I say there's got to be more to this life, and when I say that, I definitely, it's not a disrespect to any of the trades, whether it be drywall, any construction, man. Those are some great trades. And like I said, I did learn a lot out of that. I learned about hard work. I learned about showing up. I learned about being on time. Because if you didn't show up on time, you got fired. And if you didn't show up, you got fired. So it taught me a lot about adversity and working through things, even when I didn't want to do them, even when I didn't want to show up, even when I didn't want to, do the work. Like I was able to work through that. Unfortunately, during that time, one of the tools that I was using to get through that was alcohol and other substances as well. But the alcohol was always kind of the main thing. And so that's really, this started before this, obviously my teenage years and trying to, I was in different bands and wanted to be in the music business, and there's a lot of partying going on. And then as I ended up getting a job, getting into the union, I was trying to be responsible, but I was partying, man. Jess and I both, and I took it to a whole new level though. And eventually I got out of that. I was going to go back to school, and I ended up getting a job for a major utility in California in the mailroom. And I started as a temp. And I think I was about 30 by this time, 31, somewhere around there. And I went from making like 40 something dollars an hour as a journeyman drywall finisher. I think I was making 42 and some change. And because I made that decision, I'm not going back to that. I had my daughter at this time too. So we had a kid, and I made the decision to go back, and I was making like $15 an hour. But I knew that if I could get my foot in the door with this company, that I could potentially make a living out of it and maybe move around a little bit and, just do better basically than $15 an hour. So I went on, and I remember I showed up at work, and, I had my lunchbox and my boots on, and like I was ready to work. And if you remember the story, if you listened to last week's podcast, I talked about the Wrangler, the Wrangler episode. This was around that time. The Wrangler thing happened a little bit later, probably like a year into this job, but I had already kind of tried to have that mentality early on, even beforehand. When I think back about it, like I was going to just work, and I showed up, and it was just a complete different environment that I wasn't used to. Like I mentioned, if in construction, if you're late, if you don't show up, if you suck, like your ass is gone. They'll fire you. Here's your check. Bye. Like there's none of the soft stuff there. And I appreciate that now. It pissed me off back in the day, but when I think about it now, it hardened me up a bit, and it made me understand the value of hard work and showing up and being on time and all that stuff that I mentioned. So, I guess what I'm saying here too is if you're going through something that sucks right now, like I've been there, we've all been there, but just know that at some point in your life, you're probably going to look back on that, and there's always something to be learned through that, even though it sucks sometimes. And so this is one of those examples for me. Like it gave me a good work ethic. And so I show up to the mailroom job, and basically you're a machine operator. So you have these bills and envelopes and everything, and you stack them and you put it's not a lot of thinking involved in this. Okay. So it's very monotonous, and it can get quite boring. And, I was on a swing shift at the time, and that is really when the progression of my drinking really like took over. And, it took on a life of itself, I think, to some extent. And, I couldn't show up sober. I really couldn't. I couldn't go home and stay sober and go to bed. I was just practicing. I was a pro actually at the art of escapism and just escaping and being somewhere. My body was somewhere, my mind was somewhere else. And I loved it. I hated it, but I loved it also. And it was the only way I felt like I could function to get through being a scared father, husband, worker, all that stuff. And it was not ideal for me at all, and man, it was, I wanted to start my own thing at some point. I'd even thought about maybe I'll do a drywall business. And I remember they made fun of me because I wasn't, let's be honest, I wasn't the best drywall finisher, and I'm fine with that. But it is an art, and I'm okay at it, and I could definitely do it. I can get by, and it's a skill that I have that I'll always know and always have. I could always do that work if I wanted to, which was one of the great things about trades. Like once you know that trade, once you journey out in that trade, you always have your card. You always have that knowledge and those skills. You always have something to fall back on. So definitely a good thing. Glad I made it through. But it wasn't my favorite thing. And as I progressed in the mailroom job, as my drinking progressed, man, it got worse and it got real miserable. And I was going through that cycle that so many of us talk about, where we wake up, we swear we're not going to drink that day. And then whether it's by noon or whether it's by 5 o'clock, whether it's whatever, but depending on your schedule, we're back at it again. And there's the shame, the guilt, the anger, the fear, like all of it. And I just didn't know how to handle anything. I didn't know how to handle life. I was using that tool in order to deal and cope with everything. And it was absolutely exhausting. Absolutely exhausting. So let me ask you this: like, have you ever missed, like, have you been late? Because I was showing up late a lot. I started not showing up. That's probably something that maybe you've dealt with, whether you're trying to get sober or whether you already are, and you're listening to this and you go, yeah, I went through that too. You feel fuzzy. If you're in sales or something, have you ever tried to close a deal, like, or talk to a client or talk to a coworker or your boss, even when you're dehydrated, when you're slightly ashamed of what you did last night or what you don't know you did last night? You're feeling overwhelmed. You're just not on point. It's not ideal. That's not a good way to grow a business or to be a leader in a business. If you're a supervisor, a leader, or if you're just part of the crew and you're trying to work your way up, like, you're not going to make a good impression if you're showing up like that. I wanted to throw out some stats, and then I know I kind of stopped on the mailroom thing. I'm going to take you what happened after that here in just a minute, but alcohol lowers productivity, increases absenteeism, and can even limit your income potential. So alcohol doesn't just mess with your health, right? It doesn't just jack your liver all up and make you slow and lethargic and fat. It messes with your livelihood too. And this is according to CDC. Excessive alcohol use costs the U.S. economy over $240 billion a year. And 72% of that is due to lost workplace productivity. So that includes everything from showing up hungover to half functioning to full on absenteeism. You're just not showing up. People are just not showing up at all. And it's not just about the missed days. Here's another study I found in the Journal of Occupational Medicine. Employees who drink heavily are 33% more likely to call in sick and significantly more likely to underperform even when they do show up. Because why is that? Well, you're probably not up to par on your feeling your best that day. And I will say, mind you, there's a lot of dudes who show up hungover and actually they get some stuff done. Like, I can't lie about it. I know plenty of them. I know I did at some point, but I feel like, man, this is funny. I had a buddy in high school, and man, I don't know what I won't say his name, but I don't know what it was, but this dude could put down, like, I don't know. We used to drink 40s back in the day. So, I mean, he would crush like multiple 40s. We'd be like smoking blunts and like just stupid stuff. Right. And we would have a game the next day, and he would go out and he would pitch like a one hitter. And I don't know how he did it. I don't know if it's just youth. I guess you got youth on your side at that. It doesn't affect you as much as you get older. But here's the thing. That's not going to last forever. And as you do age and as responsibilities increase and life changes and life throws curveballs at us, like that type of mentality, whether you're in high school about to be pitch a big game the next day, or whether you're 35 or 40 or 25 and you're going to the construction site the next day, you're going to the office the next day and you're showing up hungover and not 100% on point. You can get away with it for a while probably, but at some point it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Somebody's going to notice, you're going to take notice. You're not going to do the job as you normally would. You're not going to serve your customer the best that you normally would. And it's going to start having an effect on your job, on your business, on your company, whatever it is. They said 33% more likely to call in sick. They're significantly underperform. Here's the kicker to all of this. Sorry, I had to get back on point there. I went off for a second and lost my spot. But a study from the University of Chicago found that people who drink heavily make on average 10 to 12% less income than their non-drinking peers. That's crazy. 10%. Let me read that one more time. A study from the University of Chicago found that people who drink heavily make on average 10 to 12% less income than their non-drinking peers. And why is that? Because consistency, clarity, and follow through matter in your business, in your career. And alcohol quietly destroys all of those. And it does it slowly. It doesn't just happen for most people immediately. That's why we think, oh, we got this, and over the course though of time, it slowly erodes it. It slowly destroys it. And it's sad, really. It's sad. And it pisses me off, to be honest, if I'm really truly honest. I just had a great conversation. I think I mentioned this last podcast. Seth and I met up and had some dinner and just got to catch up and talk about some great stuff. And that was one of the things that came up, is how much alcohol has affected people that I love, people that I know, friends, family. Some of them aren't here anymore because of that. I was talking to my dad actually just recently. He was talking about his buddy Dorky Dave. And Dorky Dave, man, I had no intention of talking about this today either. Just totally randomly came up. So why not share it? But Dorky Dave was the sweetest guy. He was the nicest guy. He really was. And, but man, the dude drank like, and Dave was a friend of my dad's. They had been friends since they were, they worked together in construction, and so they hung out and stuff. And man, Dave, he loved his red and whites, baby. The Budweiser. Let me get the Budweiser. I would always say that. He crushed the red and whites though, man. That dude would crush like an 18 pack and then crush like a bottle of Jack Daniels. And this dude did it religiously for years. For years, man. And I remember, and I was a kid when he came around. He was always super cool and super nice. And I know him and his wife at the time, they would get into these heated arguments, and they loved the shit out of each other, but they were a bit dysfunctional, we could say. And it was, a lot of it was because of the alcohol, man. He just couldn't stop. And eventually it caught up with him. And he died when he was 43 years old of liver failure. They put him in the hospital. Gave him a couple days to live, and just a terrible way to go. And, it eventually caught up to him. And that just happened to come up I was traveling for some work meetings, and I had a good chat with my dad, and we were laughing about some other stuff, and that came up, and we started talking about that. And he's another one, to add to the list of, people that I know, people that I care about, people that were in, my life, even as a kid. And there's many, many more. And there's a lot of people who are still here, but they're just suffering because of, this thing that just takes a hold and steals your spirit. It steals your soul. It robs you of God's true intention, God's true purpose for your life. And I know that, because I experienced it. I was going down that path, and I just thank God every day. I'm so blessed that I have been able to get my bearings and to make some changes and make some positive choices. And let me tell you a little bit before we move on to this next segment about what happened after the mailroom, because I do want to share that and help you see, gosh, there's such a bright light at the end of this darkness sometimes that we have to walk through. So after the mailroom, like I said, I couldn't stay sober. I ended up breaking down one day and, and talking to my wife and talking to Seth actually. And I said, I can't do this anymore. Like, I knew that something either really bad was about to happen, or I was, about to get in some trouble. Something bad was going to happen. I could feel it in my gut. And I also knew that God had something much bigger for my life, and not just my life, but my family's life, my daughter, my wife, and eventually my son. And so I made that choice, and it was super, super scary. I was so scared. I didn't know what people were going to think. I didn't know how I was going to do it. How was I going to give up? Like everything I did revolved around alcohol. How was I going to give that up? And I know it's very, very scary. It's a very scary thing to contemplate. But I knew I didn't really I was out of options at this point. And so I went and I got some help and I stopped drinking. And man, I soaked up everything. I had all the therapy sessions, the counseling, the group sessions, the meetings, the conversations, the literature, the reading, the work, the actual work, the lists, the amends, the affirmations. I mean, just everything I could. I was soaking it up. I was soaking up the word of God. I was reading my Bible. I was so ready. And part of me, in all the fear of it, I was really excited to see what life could look like. And so I want to help you kind of frame this up a little bit different. I have a friend of mine and a client of mine as well, who I was just talking to last night, and he mentioned something. He said, "This is, there's so many challenges to this, And I know he was speaking of like, man, this is a big thing. I'm about to take this on, and there's going to be a lot of challenges. And I thought about that, and that's very true. It is. There's definitely challenges. But what if we framed it up a little bit different? What if you, as you're sitting there listening to this and you're thinking about this, how would I do this? How would I do that? What if we framed it up instead of challenges as this is such an amazing opportunity to change my life, an amazing opportunity to be a better father, to be a better husband, to be a better business owner, to be a better leader, to be a better person. Like that's what this is. It's an opportunity to do that. And so when I got that opportunity, man, I ran with it. And some of you know the story. I started Sober Guy. I was commuting at the time, trying to stay sober. And my buddy told me to listen to this podcast called The New Man with Trip Lanier. Shout out to Trip. Great dude. And so I did. And Trip just like changed so much for me. I started thinking about things a little bit differently. I started getting that entrepreneurial spirit. Another one was Entrepreneur on Fire. I was listening to John Lee Dumas. And both those guys have been on the podcast, which is awesome, man. So you can go back and check those out if you're interested. But it motivated me. It made me want to stay sober. It made me want to create. It made me want to be productive again and purposeful in what I was doing. So I looked on iTunes at the time, and that's really all there really was for podcasts, I think, or the podcast app. I think Stitcher was one of them, early ones I was looking at. But I couldn't find any podcasts that were talking about sobriety other than Dr. Drew. And I think there was an AA podcast, and there may have been one or two, but I didn't find much. And that kind of gave me the idea that said, man, okay, I think like I'm going to start a podcast. And so I went back to work, that monotonous job in the mailroom. And I still have them somewhere. I have all these envelopes because I was stuffing envelopes and doing them on the conveyor thing at the time. And I was just writing notes. I was writing notes about how to start. I was watching Pat Flynn videos. Like if you haven't followed Pat Flynn, he's great. He's got a lot of good entrepreneurial spirit, business ideas and media, all kinds of stuff on there. He's got a cool story too, but I was just soaking it up as much as I could. And I eventually, sat up in bed one night and I told, wow, I'm going to start a podcast, and that's kind of actually, I was backwards there, but that's when the notes started at work. And I probably took like 30, 45 days and I was just researching what is podcasting? How do I do it? What are the projections? Like, what is the podcasting industry going to look like in 10 years and 5 years? Like what equipment do I need? How do I do an outline? Like, who am I going to interview? And there's a lot of fear in that as well. Like, I didn't know, but I was driven. I was excited. I was purposeful, and I was alcohol free. And it allowed me the freedom to be creative again, to expand, to not live in fear. It didn't mean that I didn't have some fear. I did, but I didn't let it overtake me and overrun me where I wasn't going to take action to those next steps. So what happened after that? Let's kind of wrap this up. I'm going to make it short and sweet. Basically, here's what happened. I went on to start Sober Guy in the spring of 2014. And I continued to do that. That led to a lot of great relationships, sponsorship from Foundations Recovery Network, where I was getting to travel to different conferences and do live podcasts and just connect with a lot of people. I started getting some other sponsorships as well. So it was having just a great opportunity to connect and to meet people, to create great content, to start thinking about this as a business in a sense, although that's taken a lot more time, which is fine. And, what I did though from there is I continued to do Sober Guy, continued to help me stay sober and allow this platform to grow and speak to millions of people all over the world, which is freaking awesome. Right. And then what I did is I went back to the same company because I was still working for them. And I was able to pitch the idea of, hey, like, do you know anything about Nobody knew anything about podcasting at the time, by the way, too. They thought I was crazy, but I had done my homework. I already could see, and I was already knowing how big the podcast industry was going to be back in 2015, 2016. And so long story short, I put together a presentation. I pitched it to a board of directors and I put a little cool animated video together. Here's what we could do in customer service and use the podcast as a communication vehicle. And I ended up getting hired on with no college degree, no background in communications, had a little bit of customer service experience, but I didn't have any traditional background in that. Like I said, no degree, nothing. And I got hired on as they brought me on a rotation as a communications specialist. And I launched the podcast. And long story short, it was super successful. And I still get to do some of that work today in the corporate space. And it's very successful. It's grown, massively. And it also led into me learning communications, not just podcasting, but the ins and outs of communications in a Fortune 250 corporate setting, which is huge. Like absolutely huge. That skill set will be with me forever. And I continue to use it and grow in it and showcase it, to different clients and, in all the space and all the work that I get to do. There's so many things there. So I know that was a lot stuffed in a little, there's much more, but I hope you kind of get the point that I was headed down a road of destruction, death, both spiritually and potentially physically, the way I was going. Not a lot of motivation, not a lot of excitement, not a lot of purpose in my life. And I'll say that the alcohol had a huge, huge role in all of that. And I couldn't even see it at times. But once I cut that out, that was the beginning of it. And it was the beginning of a new path, a new life trajectory of breaking old cycles for my family and my kids, and giving them a chance. And then going on to start a business, to grow in the work that I was doing in the corporate space. And dude, I'm so blessed today to be able to get to do the work that I get to do. I travel, I work remote a lot. My schedule is super flexible. I love the work that I do. And man, it's just an amazing thing. And you can do whatever it is that you want to do too. You can have all the things that you ever want to have. You can be the person that you want to be. But if you're habitually drinking, I'm telling you right now, that is stunting everything you want to do. 100%. It's not serving you well. It creates adversity. Alcohol creates adversity. And at the end of the day, it's a repetitive cycle and it's easy to get caught up in. So let's talk a little bit about, let's see, we already went over some of the data, right? I think we did. Sorry, I kind of lost my spot here on the notes. Okay. Personal wins since getting sober. We talked a little bit about that already. That's just a huge win and just being a better father, husband, all that stuff. Right. But think about your focus. Think about clear decision-making. Think about, no more hangovers, no more wasting 2 or 3 days because you feel like dog shit. Like that's huge. It's huge. You're not at your full potential when you're doing that, when you're feeling like that in any aspect of your life. Think about improved family, marriage, work, growing your business again. I mean, all the same stuff. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it's so important. It's so true. Like, you don't realize how much time drinking takes up until you quit. And then suddenly, like, it's crazy. You're like, wait, what do I do? Like, what do I do now? I got this evening's off. I'm free tonight. Like, I actually have a little bit more money. And like, wait, damn, I'm kind of on like a good sleep schedule. Like, I can actually sleep. So these shifts, man, and then talk about the energy shifts. The energy shift, listen to this. I love this one. The energy shift equals a business shift. So you're talking about your mental clarity, your ability to show up on point with energy, with excitement, with purpose, with confidence. Confidence was a huge one for me. My confidence was so low when I was still doing that way of life. It was terrible. It was really hard to be confident about anything. But man, the energy shift is a real thing. And the clarity, all that stuff combined is going to help you level up. It's going to help you crush whatever work you're doing, whatever business you're running, whatever crew you're leading, whatever that looks like. You'll also learn to respect yourself, and in turn, others will respect you. That is one of the biggest things, I think. When we respect ourselves, when we're confident with ourselves, when we know we're doing the right thing, even when no one's looking, that is when we can live like that full purpose, that true self, that authentic self that we're searching for. And a lot of the time, that's why we drink, because we don't know the authentic self. So we mask it. We put the mask on. We wear the mask. However, I never wore the mask, just for the record. Some of you know what I'm talking about. But sober, okay, so let's talk about this too. Sober business leaders. I wanted to give you a couple of examples of creative people who've had success after they stopped drinking, okay? And one of them was Darren Prince. And if you go back, gosh, I don't remember how many, maybe in the 200s, maybe the 300s, I had Darren on. I think Darren was on twice, and one of them was actually live at the Hollywood Improv, which was fun. It was him. I think Joe Sinclitico was on that time. I think Amy Dresner was on that time. We did a live show out there in West Hollywood, and it was a great time. It was fun. And Darren is a great dude. He's a sports agent and he's an author. So Darren was a very, very successful sports and celebrity agent, he managed Magic Johnson, Hulk Hogan, Dennis Rodman. His book is great. I can't remember the name of it right now. Is it in here? It's Aiming High. Yeah, Aiming High. And behind the scenes though, so he's managing all these high profile people, right? But behind the scenes, he was like deep in addiction. He was using alcohol. He was using opioids. He was masking, his anxiety, his stress. It's a pretty stressful lifestyle. Everyone thinks like, oh, you're great because everyone loves you. You're an agent to these super high celebrities. And yeah, it's like cool and all. Number one, they're just people. They wipe their asses just like you and I. Number two, it's super stressful because the demand is very, very high at that level. And so there's a lot there. So Darren was escaping and trying to deal with all of it by drinking and using opioids. He got sober in 2008. And after that, his career skyrocketed. He became a public speaker. He published the memoir, Aiming High. And now he helps others through recovery advocacy and consulting. And he calls his sobriety his superpower. And he says it allows him to show up with integrity and energy in both business and life. So Darren's a great example of that. Great dude, super humble, enjoyed talking with him. Maybe I should reach out to him, have him back on the podcast sometime. Check out his book. Go back and listen to it. It's a good one. Another one, some of y'all may have heard of her, Annie Grace, founder of This Naked Mind. So, and she more or less, it's not just women, but I think the majority of her audience is, kind of catered to women. But still, she was a successful marketing executive, and she used alcohol to unwind until it started taking more than it gave back to her. And she just realized like it wasn't serving her well, wasn't serving her family well. She quit drinking. And instead of going back to business as usual, she built a new business. She started, she wrote a book, This Naked Mind, And it's a best-selling book. It started a company that helps thousands of people change their relationship with alcohol. So her clarity, confidence, post-drinking led to a mission-driven business and a massively engaged community. She does have a huge community of people who are in there changing their own lives. And so I think I like what it says right there too, a mission-driven business. And a lot of people say, well, what am I going to do when I'm sober now? There's nothing to do. Like everything I did revolved around alcohol. You have to find something purpose-driven, mission-driven, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a side hustle, something that you really love to do, and do it. Go full force into it. I can't count how many people I've met who are sober, who went through terrible times in their life with substances, who turned their lives around, they quit, and they started businesses. And they're very successful today. Another one, Brandon Stump. I don't know if you remember Brandon. He was on the podcast a long time ago. I know the Stump family, his sister Carly, super awesome family. Carly's great. I worked very, very close with them, particularly Carly when I was sponsored by Foundations and then went on to be sponsored by Promises Behavioral Health. And we did more conferences, but just a great family. A couple of the brothers, Brandon and his other brother, both struggled really hard with addiction. Both went on to have extremely successful businesses, sober living homes. I think Brandon has like a sports agent business now. He's doing great, man. He's doing great. Another great example. And then the last one is Rich Roll, who also has been on the podcast back in early 200s, I think maybe. Rich is an ultra endurance athlete and author and podcast host. He was actually a corporate attorney down in Los Angeles before he got sober, and his drinking spiraled into full-blown just addiction in his 30s. And he was really, really low. And he hit the lowest point. He was overweight. He was unhealthy. He was spiritually drained. And I remember he was like a Olympic or competition swimmer back in the day before he became an attorney. He was really, really good in college. And he lost that. I mentioned him overweight. And I remember him saying, can't remember if it was on the podcast or the book, that he like walked up a flight of stairs. He was like 38 and he was huffing and he could barely walk up the stairs. He was eating McDonald's cheeseburgers and drinking freaking beer and all kinds of nasty stuff. And he just had finally had enough. He was exhausted. And so he hit that low point. He decided to get sober. He completely overhauled his lifestyle. He went to a plant-based lifestyle, which is what he's well known for. And then he went on to become a world-class top ultra endurance athlete, like at 39 or 40 years old. He wrote the best-selling memoir, Finding Ultra, which is a great book. And then he now hosts the Rich Roll podcast. It's one of the biggest wellness shows out there. Maybe you've heard of it. But Rich credits his sobriety as the foundation of everything he's built. And he says he never would have tapped into that potential without it. And, I 100% feel the same way Rich does, in that, like, there's no way I would be where I'm at today if I didn't make that decision to cut that crap out of my life, period, because it was a path to nowhere. It was a dead end. And I'm so happy that I did it. And I think if you're contemplating that decision right now, you're listening to this, I can promise you, if you stick to it, you're going to be very happy that you did as well. All right. Last little segment here, and then I'll give you some takeaways, some actionable items, some takeaways that you can actually do today to maybe get yourself on the right path. And then we'll wrap up. So, you're sober at work when you're the only one at the party actually eating the food. I don't like that joke. I don't know why that got put in here, but it's not very good. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on from that one. Oh man. But, it's a little weird at first, I gotta say. Let's just start there. I thought that, being like, I was being charismatic and I was being, open and social and whatever when I was drinking. And, when I look back now, whether it was at a work event or whether it was at a wedding, like, for some reason I keep having my brother-in-law's wedding in mind. And I remember my mom saying something to me like, I think she said, you're being like your dad or something. And I think that really, it pissed me off at the time, but it hurt me a little bit too, but I knew she was right. And no offense to my dad, like we're working on it, we're working on our stuff. I've let a lot of that crap go. I love him and whatever, but like she was right in that sense as far as the drinking goes at that time. And I just thought I was doing what I'm supposed to do. I just thought that's what I was supposed to be, partying and whatever. And in fact, I was just insecure. I was dumb. I was young. I was not as cool as I thought I was. And so when I cut that out, like going to those events again, the weddings, the work functions, the networking things, man, they are a little bit awkward at first. It's like but I actually was in the moment, even if I was a little bit unsettled, even if I was a little bit like nervous or whatever, at least I was in the moment. At least I remembered people's names. I take a lot of pride in that. It's very important. It's one of those little tricks. If you remember people's names and you call them by their name, very powerful. I always love when someone knows my name. Hey, Shane. Oh man, hey, they know my name. Cool. It makes you feel connected that way. It's very, very important. And so now I remember people. Before I didn't care. I was too busy worrying about myself. I even remember like the first Foundations recovery conferences that we did. They were always awesome, but like I was still fairly new in my sobriety. Like I was a couple years in, and they, big events like that, they were still a little bit awkward. I was still trying to learn, the ropes. And I'll tell you the biggest secret and the problem with networking and social events and even just going out in public, just talking to people. We're so worried about ourselves that we're insecure, and we have to flip it around. We have to remember it's not about us. It's about us being servants. It's about us serving others. It's about us glorifying God in all that we do. And if you remember that, like let's say like a public speaking event, you have to go speak. Like I do that, and it's nerve-wracking sometimes, even after doing it so many times and podcasts and speaking and live stuff. And I still get a little nervous, but I get a lot less nervous than I used to because I know it's not about me. It's not about me. There's a group of amazing people who I have the privilege to speak to. And if I can encourage them, if I can help motivate them, if I can help share some of my experience with them and it helps them, that is the point. It has nothing to do with me. And so if you take self out and be of service, have a service mindset, great things will happen. Great things will happen. Is it a little bit weird at first? Sure. Takes a little bit of time, takes a little bit of practice. But man, when you're sober-minded and you are doing the next right thing and you have some tools that you can use, you have some people, some community around you to support, encourage you, build you up, man, like amazing things can happen that you can't even believe. I can promise you that. All right. So let's take a couple actionable takeaways and then we're going to wrap up today. Number one, how do you take an honest look at your drinking and productivity? Okay. And so here's what I want to tell you to do here. Take 1 week. If you're still drinking right now, take 1 week and track how your drinking habits are affecting your work output, your sleep, and your creativity, and maybe your energy too. You kind of couple that in with work output. But even if you just, I only drink on the weekends. Okay. Well, drink on the weekend and then track how those habits affect you at work in your energy, output, sleep, and creativity. Write those down. See how that looks. See what that feels like. All right. And then number 2, create a sober morning routine. All you need is 15 minutes. Okay. Write a couple things out, pray, meditate, have a cup of coffee, do it without a hangover, obviously. And you get to set the tone for an amazing day, an amazing work day, an amazing Saturday, an amazing Sunday. It doesn't take long. Okay. So even if you just pray and meditate over a cup of coffee, sit outside, get some sun, just pick a simple routine. Start with 10, 15 minutes tops. And just try to do that consistently for a week, for 2 weeks, for 21 days if you can, for 30 days. Be awesome. You'll start to create new patterns, new routines, and start to change the way you think about things. All right, number 3, surround yourself with support. This is so huge here. It's so much easier to level up in a circle that isn't dragging you down. Okay? So You are who you hang out with. Okay. And I think there's that old quote by Jim Rohn: show me the 5 people you hang with and I'll show you your future. It's very, very true. It doesn't mean we have to ditch all our old homies, but sometimes we need some distance. We need to create some new environments, some new places, some new people, some new things, and we need to change for a while. And that's a huge thing. So think about that. So you got to surround yourself with support. You got to surround yourself with good people. If this hits home for you, if you're listening, you're like, man, there's a lot of good things I can relate to in here. Number one, I appreciate that. And that's why I continue to do this work. I just want to kind of reinforce though, alcohol might seem like it's a tool to use for, even business meetings, for you to relax on the weekend. But the truth is it's really like, it'll sabotage everything in the long run. So if you're trying to build something great, like, don't let alcohol be the thing that's holding you back, because I can promise it's not serving you well in the long run. But as I was saying, if this kind of hit home for you and you're like, man, we have some awesome resources. We have a great free men's community called the Victory Circle, where dudes can connect, they can share, they can grow together in sobriety. And if you're looking for more of a personalized support, I offer one-on-one coaching. So to help you like put a plan together, put a 90-day plan together, help you through all that whole process and start living with purpose, start living alcohol-free, sober-minded. Those links are in the show notes for you. Or you can also just head over to thatsoberguy.com. I appreciate you guys tuning in today to That Sober Guy podcast. If you enjoyed the episode today, don't forget to share it with a friend. Take care. God bless. Keep your blood clean.